Welcome in, folks, for this week's episode of What's Bruin. I'm your host, Chris Nozick, joined by Dom Tiano, as I am every week. And we are presented by our good friends over at Ice Shaker. Check them out at iceshaker.com. We'll talk a little bit more about them later on. Dom, are you excited for tonight's show?
I'm very excited. How about you, Chris?
I couldn't be more excited, and I'll let you explain to the folks out there watching why we are so excited for tonight's show.
Well, it's not too often that we get to talk to somebody who's watched hockey longer than I have, so that is a pleasure in itself. The man is an absolute historian. He can recall who drank what on the bench in 1972 from memory. The incomparable Mick Colageo joins us. Mick, thank you for coming on board and doing this show with us.
Pleasure, guys. Really happy to be here. I love when Dom tweets. It's always going to be, oh, there's a great resource. I'm going to the library now. See everyone later. I got to catch up on my daily salary cap here and find out what he's got to say. So this is really fun for me too.
And it's a great day because Matthew Poitras sent back down to Providence. Let's start there. Dom, you sent that one out earlier. What did you guys think of that?
Paper transaction. That's all it is. But it makes me wonder whether Mark Kastelik is ready to go for Tuesday night, maybe even Hampus Lindholm, and that the reason they couldn't just make the simple move and send Mike Callahan back down is we don't know the extent of his injury from yesterday, so he can't be sent down until that's cleared up.
Yeah, Callahan, unfortunately, early in the game, he had a vulcanized rubber sandwich. So
yeah.
It's not the pregame meal you want. But anyway, you got it. Got it in the
You
first
covered
period.
the game, didn't you, Mick, yesterday?
I was there.
Any word?
No, nobody knew anything. They strategically don't know things right after the game. You always get coach before you get players. So there's no time for the coach to find out things before he talks to the media. So that way the team doesn't have to say anything until it's good and ready. And you know, that the coach isn't put in that position where he has to decide whether or not, you know, that they don't find that stuff out until after they've seen us. And I'm sure it's no accident. It's you know, these things are very strategically planned out. The American Hockey League's All-Star Weekend is this weekend, by the way. So there was certainly no urgency for Matty Poitras to be down on the farm, but he and he's not listed. The two players were listed for the P Bruins in the All-Star Skills, which I guess are today, and then the game tomorrow is were Callahan and goalie Michael DiPietro.
Yeah.
So now Callahan is obviously not participating tonight. Who knows? Maybe Poitras, because he's not I'm not streaming this event, so I don't know. I can't prove anything. And I didn't text. I was thinking of texting Mark Diver. I figured he probably knows the answer to this. But I thought, what if he was like doesn't have to go through waivers, so he's an emergency replacement to represent the P Bruins in the skills? I don't know. Just a harebrained theory go running through my head.
Yeah,
anything's a possibility with these guys. Anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not ruling that out. This event is out on the West Coast, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't start till 9 p.m. our time, so it's a late night.
Yeah. So that's a 6-hour flight you didn't necessarily want to have, but.
Yeah, well, as Tom said, it's probably just a paper transaction. I mean, when you factor in the fact that over the last 3 days, you've sent down Max Jones, Vinny Lettieri, and now Matthew Poitras, there's, at least in my opinion, there's something coming off the IR. Maybe it's Kastelik, and like you said, Dom, it probably is because they just didn't know where Callahan stood as far as his injury. Because if he goes on IR, then they can't send him down.
Now, here's a good question for Mick. It's different than the late 60s, the 70s, maybe even the early 80s that, players played through anything. didn't matter what it was, right? Unless you were Bobby Orr, of course. And
Wayne Cashman couldn't tie his skates, and he was still playing the game.
Yeah. So, if it was your decision, would Hampus Lindholm play a game before the Four Nations, or would you let him? Would you make him sit out to get the extra time off?
I'm like without inside knowledge of where he's at, my tendency is to think that proceed with caution. I've never known a broken kneecap that I would want to take any of the gray area and put it into the competition. If the Bruins are going to figure this out, if they're going to be a team that's going to rally and seize a playoff spot here and be better at the end of the season than they obviously have been for most of it, then they have to be able to prove that without him, and then have him be a great boost, kind of like a trade. If it turns out to be that, we really want to get him back in here when we can, but we don't have him ready, if we don't see him, it's because he's not ready, because they desperately need him in there. They need to have his ability to join the attack, be part of the four-man front, and with his recovering ability, even if it's not zone-to-zone speed, he's so smart with how he does it. He doesn't get himself in the same kind of trouble that it's natural for a kid like Lowry to get himself into, even though he has tremendous recovery speed. That's not the game the Bruins want to play. You can't serve two masters and develop him in the NHL and be at your optimum level of winnability.
Now, do we know if during that Four Nations break, like what the limitations are as far as access to ice and facilities and stuff like that the players have? Because obviously during the holiday freeze in December, they can't even enter the facilities without it being investigated.
Yeah, that was part of those are obviously part of the CBA, whereas the Four Nations, anything I've tried to find out about this, there seems to be kind of like a nothing to see here sort of a thing. There's no discussion. Nobody's talking about there being a freeze on player movement or player access or player activity. I can't imagine, for the amount of time that the league's going to be shut down, that they don't want anybody on the ice. My guess is everybody's getting a week-long vacation, but then they're going to come back and they're going to practice.
Yeah, it seems to me they're making the rules as they go along. First, you hear there's a roster freeze. Now I'm hearing there is not a roster freeze. There is a set number of days that the players are off, and I'm not sure. I can't recall what it is, but you're right that at some point they'll be back on the ice while the tournament's going on, Mick.
The Bruins have been very good about spacing those out. And the downside of that is that you go through these stretches where your schedule is busy and you hardly ever practice. So, especially if there's travel involved. So it's become a league now where something that's emerged in the last few years that I never thought I would hear in my life is a team has a practice and that's an event. And the coach will make reference to the press when discussing, well, we actually got to have a practice and it was great. And we actually got on the ice and blah, 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 blah. That used to be a thing. Now it's like the exception to the rule is, hey, we had practice. We got to go through some things. It's like, how the heck did the league get to this point that this has become so hard? Everybody's got tablets on the bench and meetings galore, but a practice has become a luxury.
All collective bargaining, Mick. That's all it is. Days off are negotiated in the CBA, and you know how negotiations go. You have to give something up to get something in every case. So that's where that comes from.
And they're not adversarial these days, so they're not sweating the small stuff.
No.
Because they're all making money hand over fist. And the players are complicit in this. As much as I it angered me that the league put the Stanley Cup up for grabs in a summer bubble tournament, a full off season after the 1920 season was truncated. And you go 4 months down the road and teams are playing for the Stanley Cup and they're saying this is about that season we had last year. It was ridiculous. Yeah. It was absurd, but the players were like, yeah, hell yeah, we want the money.
Yeah.
Because the league was in question at that point. Revenues were no fans when they came back for the shortened 2021. It wasn't until late in the season that they were actually able to fill the buildings. So if I was in their shoes, I can understand why they went the way they did, but I just find that to be a very unfortunate cheapening of the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, that might not be an issue for Boston this year as they currently sit outside a top 3 position and a wild card position in the standings. So going for the cup is a luxury right now that we don't know if we'll have. And as Kevin points out, he says that the Bees should throw in the towel, get a top 10 pick and sell whoever you're not bringing back. So at this point, the question becomes, who aren't you bringing back? And
well, no, before we go that far, let's not skip too far ahead. Mick, your thoughts on the season so far, what you see has gone wrong, and then we'll get to Chris's question, and what do you think they should do moving forward in terms of moving bodies out?
2 significant things went wrong. Obviously, it begins with Jeremy Swayman. The Bruins clearly underestimated what it was going to take to get him signed, and they didn't get out in front of it, and it became a training camp holdout. And as the late, great Pat Burns told my colleague Chris Hurley back in the day, probably when Byron Dafoe was holding out in 1999 after being a Vezina finalist, I've never seen a holdout that didn't hurt the player and the team. And in this case, it clearly did both. That's number one. It's unavoidable that Brad Marchand had 3 off-season surgeries that limited his ability to play up to his standards. And it took him a while to become the version of Brad Marchand that he is right now, which is probably the best version that we're going to see of him as a hockey player for the rest of his career. He's able to score big goals. He's still able to get inside, things I wasn't sure I would ever see again when I was watching him earlier this season. So it took him time to become the player he is. Then there is this very strange thing that happened that I still can't wrap my head around. And that is, why at the same time did Charlie McAvoy, Charlie Coyle, David Pastrnak, why did so many returning players, Morgan Geekie, play so far off of who they are as players in the first couple of months of the season? Why were they so far out of it? Why did they look like they didn't have a camp? I hadn't seen a Bruins team that looked this out of sorts at the beginning of a season since the year they traded Phil Esposito, which was the fall of 1975. They didn't have Bobby Orr yet because he was recovering from knee surgery. He wasn't ready to play. Bobby Orr's first game that year was the first game that Brad Park, John Rattel, and Joe Zanussi played with them after the blockbuster, the November 7th blockbuster. So it was a whole different team in one day. And so this Bruins team here, Jim Montgomery was just trying to figure out. Jonas Korpisalo played well, more than well, when needed, especially at the beginning before Swayman began to even get close to his form. And And it brought to mind, I never got the answer to why so many guys were off. Two that notably were not. Elias Lindholm, Pavel Zacha. And before Jim Montgomery got fired, he moved Pavel Zacha from left wing to center because he needed him to affect more of the game. That leveraged Matt Poitras to Providence. It turned out to be a great demotion for Poitras because it allowed him to skate him to a positive room, a positive situation, and impact the game, playing big nights, every situation, and find himself and find his joy. And he did, and he came back, and he's brought it back, and we saw it yesterday. And so it turned out to be serendipity for Poitras. But the primary reason why he went down was because Zacha needed to go to the middle. And you didn't want Poitras playing wing, and you didn't want him playing 4 minutes a night or sitting in the stands. And none of it made any sense. But they were desperate to try to get a handle on what's going on with his team. And Pavel Zacha was playing great two-way hockey. His tenacity, checking up and down the ice, second, third efforts, terrific season by him has gotten completely lost amidst the Bruins' chaos. It's a very quietly, he has been their best forward until Pasta went on this tear that he's on. And we know how capable he is of, once he starts feeling it, boy, he starts inventing new ways to score goals. And so watching Pasta this last, since the new year, well, he started picking it up in December. Everybody got a kick when the coaching change was made. But after that rush of adrenaline, they settled back into being a team that has a hard time. Offense does not come easily for them. So Joe Sacco is like, we have to have our defensive foundation. We have to have our defensive structure. That has to be at the forefront of our game. And what emerged from all of that, for me, looking at the Bruins, not only last season, but the dream year of the year before, was it could be that the Bruins were elevated beyond what I thought by their goaltending. Extraordinary goaltending. 22, 23, 23, 24. The roles changed somewhat in 23, 24. But I remember even in the early stages of the first half of the 22-23 season, when teams would come in, like Carolina, were playing really well, thought they were going to come in and finally knock the Bruins off their throne, and did play a great game. And you could just see when they would finally isolate somebody in front and have a golden opportunity, and Linus would steal it from them. And you saw every head on their bench go like this. And they would all be patting each other on the back as they left the ice, kind of like, we did enough to win this hockey game. We should have won the game. The damn goalie stole it from us. Larry Brooks had written, and I love Larry Brooks. I think he's fantastic. New York Post, Rangers writer, NHL writer for many, many moons. He insisted that Sorokin should have won the Vezina because Ullmark was playing behind a wagon of a team. Had he been at the games, he might have seen what we all saw watching the Bruins night in and night out, and that is that there are an awful lot of those games that Ullmark was the difference maker. There are a ton of one-goal games. I think there were 14 one-goal games they may not have finished that way in the scoreboard because of empty net goals, but there were like 14 games that were like in that situation in the first half of that season, the one where they had 135 points, and they won 9 of those games, and they were all because of Linus. And
he stole them. He stole them.
So there were a lot of nights the Bruins gave up too many great A's in those 2 seasons, and the extraordinary goaltending is what got them through it. This year,
not only that, Mick, but in a game that's tied and the goaltending is standing on their head, that team had the offense that they could get the next one. You can't say that about this team.
That's why I thought, just to kind of, if I can piggyback on that thought, I thought that they should have gone after a player like, now I know the money, the cap, and everything has to be right, but a Tyler Toffoli type of player if they could have gone for a player like that when it became apparent that this team hits a wall. It was early in the season, and you could tell that they could not outscore their mistakes. Whether they made a lot of mistakes in the game or whether they only made a few, they were not outscoring the mistakes. And it really became apparent that this team needed something to ease some of those one-goal games, to somehow just give them a little bit of breathing space if they could have that stick over there that's capable of knocking. It may make a difference of only 5 games during the course of the year. But what happens if you turn 5 L's into 5 W's for the Bruins right now? Where are they?
Top spot.
Place.
Right. So I really wanted to see something like that. You have to get the right player. It has to be the right personality. Yeah, there's an awful lot there that goes into it. I don't know what effort they were trying to make in that regard, if any, at that point, or if they were just convinced that, look, we can do this by committee. Our defense gets involved in our offense. We're going to be okay. Montgomery's Bruins were never able to outscore their mistakes. And at the 20-game mark, it became apparent to the team that, look, we had a little run. We won a few games, and now we're back to where we were doing the same stuff over and over again. We got to do something about this. Boom, they make the change. They elevate Joe Sacco to interim head coach, and they go forward. And what we've seen is a lot more of the same after that initial push. And now it's become a dichotomy of home and away. The Bruins have no resilience on the road. You can count the seconds before they're going to get scored on when they score a goal. I even tweeted after they took the lead yesterday that this is where the Bruins fans all hold their breath. But after 15 seconds, Swayman has made a save, and 15 seconds have not yielded the tying goal. Well, 19 seconds after that,
they scored.
They scored. And credit to the Bruins, their players, for saying not today and bouncing back from that point forward. It was a really strong effort from them. The Rangers wilted. The Rangers have been on a hell of a run. They've really repaired their season. They're feeling pretty good about themselves. They didn't have it to fight with the Bruins yesterday. The Bruins wanted it more, and the Rangers wilted. So the Rangers need to make sure now that they don't let that game yesterday change their season, the same one that the January 2nd game against the Bruins at MSG changed their season, because the Bruins went in there in a game that they really needed to play a good road game, and they stunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your last comment about Sacco actually made this comment stand out. Boatman is asking thoughts on Sacco and the coaching staff. And I agree with this sentiment. It seems like a better fit with this roster than when Montgomery was here at the beginning of the year. What are your thoughts on how the coaching change has helped or not the way that we've seen this team perform on the ice?
Yeah. Well, Monty coaches the way Robbie Ftorek coached the Bruins back in 01-02 and 02-03. He likes a lot of possession and a lot of short passes and a lot of puck support where you keep moving the target from the forecheckers and meander the puck around the ice through little networking of a lot of touches. A lot of different people will touch the puck on the way up the ice. And then it finally funnels down to the opposing net and bang, 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 bang. It may not look that fast when they're doing it, but it's hard for the opponents to get a read on it. When they're playing it well, then it looks great. And remember, Ftorek's first of 2 years with the Bruins, he finished second overall in the league to the Red Wings. The Red Wings won the Cup. The Bruins obviously lost in 6 to Montreal in the opening round. And I saw Harry Sinden outside the Bruins locker room after their loss in Montreal for Game 6 and just was like, what do you think? And he said, we played beautifully. Their goalie was too good. It was that simple for him. Theodore stole the series as far as he was concerned. He liked the way Ftorek coached the Bruins. And Montgomery is similar in that a lot of people touch the puck, a lot of little passes up the ice. Sacco has kind of taken the game more the way Bruce Cassidy had it. We want to get the puck deep. We want to get it high. We want to get people to the net. We want to shoot the puck. It's a simpler offensive attack. No Bruins coach since Claude Julien has completely done away with their zone defense, although each coach has put his own little tweaky marks on it. As far as defensemen are not supposed to go outside the dots laterally, let the forwards do the eliminations, and you protect your patch of ice. And it really works well for certain personnel. Nikita Zadorov has had the hardest time trying to contain his instincts playing this system. He plays more like Nick Boynton. If the puck goes up the half wall and then out to the point, you're going to find him all the way at the point checking the player. He'll follow it all the way out there like that and expect to have backfill from his forwards. This is very much not the way the Bruins play defense. So Zadorov often gets lured out of his areas, out of his patch when the puck is in the Boston zone. The downside of that system, and we never got to see Claude respond to it, but the Florida Panthers gave the whole league the blueprint in the 23 series that the teams played, where you just do hard arounds. And the Bruins don't want to go out of their structure, so they don't go chasing to interrupt the hard arounds. So now what you do is you've got a rotating box of 5-on-5, looks like a power play, because the Bruins are just trying to reach, trying to stab, but they're not getting it. And you're moving the puck around in the circle, and you're locking them down into a long shift and having them in their own zone and generating chances.
I think Carolina does the same thing too, Mick, to the Bruins.
You mean from an offensive standpoint when they're in the attacking zone?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we know they don't do that defensively. They play man-to-man.
Right.
So watching Sacco kind of like try to take this forward and say, it's not the same thing as if he had this team. If he had the appointment to coach this team in the month of May after the Bruins missed the playoffs, we don't really know what that defensive structure would be. Because he's been asked to step in the moment, and you certainly don't want to turn the entire thing inside out when management's belief is that what we've been building here over a number of years, we still believe in, and there's for a bunch of reasons we think it needs to come from a different voice right now. We need to shake this up somehow. That doesn't mean they want to reinvent the game of hockey for those players that they selected to play the way they want to play. So to some degree, it would be unfair to judge him from a hockey standpoint on what we're looking at. On the other hand, you say, okay, is it as simple as he makes the playoffs, he's our coach next year? He doesn't make the playoffs, we fire him. I don't really know. I think it really depends on what the response is for the players in terms of how they play, how they get along with each other, how they play the game together, how they compete. If they're playing for the coach, then you got to consider them going forward if they're playing for them. If they're playing hard for them and they're blocking shots, that's obviously how Hampus Lindholm went out of the lineup. They need to show me that they can play hard and sustain effort and sustain composure on the road. That's what I got to see. Playoffs or not, they have to be a way better team on the road, because if you say they've been playing to their identity, then it's we bend and we break, because that's been their road. That's been their season on the road. Yeah, and at times it looks like that at home, but their home records holds up pretty well.
Yeah, their road record right now is 9-14-3. Meanwhile, at home, they're 17-8-3. So,
and how many of those blowouts? They've had some games really get away from them this year, and they're not entirely limited to when Montgomery was coaching the team. Those games are invariably on the road.
Yeah, the first Winnipeg one comes to mind. Seattle, that road trip, they had 2 or 3 that completely got out of hand in the third period. So they're just not playing, like you said, to the identity that we know them to be. So, Dom, did you have a follow-up there?
No, I want to go back to your question that you asked earlier. So, Mick, Chris is going to read you a list of names one by one, and you put on your Don Sweeney cap, and you tell me whether you're looking to move them to re-sign them or make a decision in the offseason?
Oh boy, you're putting me on the spot with this list. I mean, I could go through the whole team, but I'm not going to, just because we know certain guys are not. I don't think Pastrnak
No,
or
you just look
Lindholm.
at the guys that are UFA.
I don't think Dom wants you to filter
the
this
guys
for
that are
me.
UFA or have 1 year left.
Let's start with, well, everyone's favorite, Trent Frederick.
Yeah. Well, we know one team that would love to sign him. And I think that a lot of teams like the idea of Trent Frederick more than they would like Trent Frederick. And I say this with fear and trepidation because it makes me sound like I don't like Trent Frederick. I love Trent Frederick. I want to see more players like Trent Frederick. I do think, though, that he is such a nice guy and he plays such an honorable kind of a game that he tends to be a little nice along the boards. He plays fair, and so people look at how big he is, how strong he is, how willing he is, and they think there's an offensive upside there that the Bruins have not tapped, and they say, boy, the market's going to be great. I'd love to know what's on the table for Donnie Sweeney for Trent Frederick. Love to know what is on the table, because that to me is what has to drive it. Now, it may be that the story is going to be, and any of these free agents, UFA guys that get to this point in the season and they're not signed, I can't think of one who's ever come back that wasn't at the end of his career on a series of 1-year deals, whether it was Chara or Bergeron or Krejci. He's in the DeBrusque category, and if it's not done by now, why not? So that tells me that the Bruins haven't made up their mind, and if they haven't made up their mind, then that means that they haven't offered a contract that Frederick would have said yes to. So, and it may be that he's being told, listen, be patient with this, because he may knock it out of the park this summer. His statistics may not live up to his contract, but there are teams that will put out big money for players because they think that they can change the game for that team. Everybody wants the next Tom Wilson. Some teams may think Trent Frederick on our team will be the next Tom Wilson. And first off, Trent Frederick is nowhere near as mean as Tom Wilson. He's nowhere near as careless as Tom Wilson. He's nowhere near as reckless as Tom Wilson. Trent Frederick is overly honorable. And if anything, I think that will make his next contract an overpayment, because the effect that teams want to see when they love the idea of Trent Frederick. If you look at who Trent Frederick is, the player, to me, he's a big body who does really well getting pucks in and out of the zone. He's pretty reliable along the walls. He can play center, and Donnie Sweeney loves his hybrids. He loves his centers who can play wing or vice versa. And David Backes was supposed to be that. Charlie Coyle was that. Pavel Zacha has become that. And on we go. And so Frederick, even though Montgomery had determined out loud, Frederick's a winger. That was the stance on it. If Bruins don't sign him and St. Louis is out front and acquiring his rights ahead of July 1 with a little draft pick, then however this pans out, he'll be a winger on that team. But I'm not sure that he will on every other team. I think most teams would want to see him in the middle, since he came up as a center and has played a chunk of his career, though not the majority at that position. He checks a lot of boxes for a lot of teams, but when you're standing over the grass, you see the brown holes of dirt in between the blades. It's not as green as it is on the other side of the fence. We see all the players' warts when we're watching the team every night. We want more from Freddie. We want him to be a game changer, and we're just thinking, where is it? And then he has a big game, and it's all great, good for Frederick, good for Frederick. When does it get past good for Frederick and good for the Bruins? Because they got this guy that we can now count on, who's going to be there every night and now he's going to be this guy that we got to sign him. Nobody's saying that right now. And so as much as I want to see a bigger, tougher, stronger, meaner, better fighting Bruins team that doesn't get intimidated by, well, there was the Lightning a few years ago with their daddy. Now it's the Panthers. So you definitely don't want to see them trend away from Frederic. What about the player individually? Is he the guy, and what are you going to pay to keep him? And what's on the table? So that's my answer there. It's the information I don't know is what would drive it.
Yeah, for sure. Next up that I'm going to say is I think you're getting a little more out of him, what you'd like to see from Frederic. Morgan Geekie. I know he's a restricted free agent versus Trent Frederic, who's an unrestricted, but there's a lot of people who are clamoring for him to trade him while his value is high because he's playing with Pasta and Zacha on that top line. What are your thoughts?
I think Geekie's been terrific, and I don't think it's limited to this contextual benefit that he gets from playing with the skill. There's a lot of guys who they put with the skill, it doesn't work out. With him, it works out.
Exactly.
They even did in the playoffs last year what Chicago did with Michael Handzus in 2013, and they elevated him from being a fourth-line grinder to a second-line center between skill because they knew that he could apply his plumbing skills to that line and help to solidify two lines. When Marian Hossa came back into their lineup midway through that Stanley Cup final, Handzus also went to the top six and became the glue, the defensive cog in that machine. Similarly, while Geekie sort of has this kind of a Wayne Cashman style, he's not too pretty on the skates, but the puck tends to follow him around through traffic. He's got a good knack. The thing that I love about him, and this is so desperately needed on the Bruins, is he shoots the puck instinctually on first opportunity. So many guys are deferring to others. So many guys are having second thoughts, whether it's confidence, the yips. I didn't see my angle. Geekie's been excellent at finding his way into spots where if the puck comes to him, bam, and you get a formidable shot on net. And this is on a team that consistently gets outshot. So I'm looking at him and saying, let's get this kid done. He's a player who can play center for you when you need it. He's a good winger. He can play either side of the ice. He's clearly not the prettiest skater in the world, but you need all kinds. It takes a village, and this guy's been a terrific find. You took him, you grabbed him of a guy, or group two that Seattle walked away from, and you've elevated him, and you've found it. You've done what every GM in the league wants to do, which is unlock what another team was not able to find in another player, and you've found it. You've done it. Let's go.
Couldn't agree more.
I got this question, quick follow-up for you, because I saw something that you sent out yesterday after Pastrnak scored, and Mick, feel free to chime in as well. Would you rather see Geekie stay with Pastrnak and Zacha, or put Poitras in the middle of those two instead?
Yeah, that was you that sent it to me, and I didn't respond because I'm the way you said it to me was Geekie, Poitras, Pastrnak, and I'm not breaking up Zacha and Pastrnak.
And they may need to keep Zacha in the middle here. I will say this too, that one of the other moving parts of all of that is that Charlie Coyle has been a better winger than he had been in any other deployment by the Bruins since he'd been with them. He's been playing well on the wing, whereas I felt like every other prior time that they've ever tried to move him over there, I'm thinking like, this ain't working. The kid's a center. This time, I feel like I was surprised they did it. I thought it was desperate. And I was like, nah, I don't like it. It's temporary. He's been okay. Been pretty good, actually. So, and the other thing is that, and this I think is kind of an age thing, and Dom might be able to back me up on this. When you're young, you crave order. We rank everything. I know where my 5 best pizzas of the world are, the 5 most beautiful women in the world, the 5 best rock bands in the world. You're not going to tell me any different. Now that I'm old, I'm a reformed ranker. I hate rankings. I hate being asked best of this, best of that. It's subjective. It's temporary. It changes overnight. And the way I look at the Bruins and their lines, I resist these. This is working. Let's run it out. And when it stops in 8 games, it doesn't mean I was wrong. It means that by then, something else might be the solution. When the Blackhawks were all that in a bag of chips 10 years ago, I was watching on TV when they were playing one of their games, and I decided to take out a reporter's notepad and chart their lines as I was watching Joel Quenneville send them over the boards. Do you know I could not stay with it? I could not go through half the first period. I got rid of the notepad. I just could not follow it because he kept on changing everything. It just barely stayed together. I don't know if there were 2 guys out there that were out there for more than 50% of the time that the other one was at any point. And if you can play that way, then that itself is awesome because it means, A, you have the luxury of depth. B, it means that you make yourself very difficult to scout. And very difficult to defend, very difficult to match up against. So my attitude toward this is if Potter's playing well, yeah, I want to look at it, but I'm not going to break up anything that's working in order to do it. That's the number one cardinal rule. If these guys are going, some people believe this about the goalie. Do you make sure that Korpisalo gets a certain number of starts, or do you say, hey, if Jeremy Swayman gets hot, we got to ride this out? Well, there's a lot that goes into that decision based on what you need to do with your season and what position you are in the standings and all of that. In the case of these pocket situations, yeah, they may be temporary. It may be the Potter's going to hit a wall after a little while. And the way these seasons have been going lately, an injury will decide it for us. So I'm not worried about any of that. I do like certain guys in certain places. I do believe that certain guys are better wingers, stick inside. If they're a right shot, being better left winger. Michael Ryder was clearly one of those guys when the Bruins acquired him in 2008-09. Claude Julien had coached him when one of his 2 30-goal seasons in Montreal, and Julien knew exactly what to do with him. That's why he made him a left winger, because Michael Ryder played right-handed shot, but his game was to get the puck in the left wing corner, to curl a right-handed shot out and either pass across to the slot, work it to the top of the circle and fire himself, or pass to the point. That was his game, to come out of the corner with the puck. That's how he played hockey. And if you look at if you play through his 30 goals, the year he scored 30, I think, or 31, there's a YouTube that shows like all 31 of those. If you watch them all, I think one goal comes right of center. Every single one of them was either in the middle of the ice or from the off wing. And Steve Hines, who was a good player for the Bruins after the 92 Olympics, coming up at the same time as Joey Juneau, Ted Donato, and Glenn Murray from Junior, and infused that really lifeless 91-92 Bruins team and made him a conference finalist again. Stephen Hines was pretty good until he got some concussions. He was a guy who was on a 40-goal pace one year until Darius Kasparaitis hit him in the middle of the rink and really wrecked him. And but Hines was one of those guys too, better on the left than the right. But the Bruins never did that. They never moved him over there. But he was better over there. Mike Kanuba, right-handed shot, left wing. He was better over there. So there's always guys who that thrive in certain positions, but it may not necessarily be with certain line mates. It may have more to do with how they play.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you agreed with me, Mick, because Chris tries to lure me into these line projections all the time, and he knows
they're fun. They're fun to do. I used to do them long before there was an internet. I used to sit with a legal pad at my breakfast table and do line charts all the time. That's what I would do, and I just look at these teams, and look at these teams, and look at these teams. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I forgot that Ross Lonsbury played regular left wing with Rick McLeish when the Flyers were at the height of their powers in the mid-'70s. And one of the Flyers' longtime beat writers corrected me on this. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of paper that needs to be torn up. Because I always had him with Kinderchuk for some reason.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's these things. The nature of the game is it keeps on changing. So I try not to get too hung up on the idea that there's some sort of ideal matchup. Although we saw Peter Chiarelli go from, let's see, he ordered Jeff Gorton to trade Nick Boynton for Paul Mara. Paul Mara winds up going to the Rangers for Aaron Ward, who isn't getting along with Yager. Ward comes to the Bruins, and then he's eventually replaced by Derek Morris, who then is told, no, we're not going to trade you. We want you. We're going to keep you here. And then Chiarelli had to apologize to him because he was like, it's not working out. I'm trying to find the right partner for Big Z. You're not it. And he winds up getting Dennis Seidenberg. And it turns out that even though Johnny Boychuk played a lot of regular season with Chara, the shutdown pair of Seidenberg and Chara is what they wound up eventually going with and saying, this is our pairing. Sometimes there's like a million little reasons why one player is going to play with another one, and you're trying to get the right partnerships together. And a lot of times, I mean, I think that the Gretzky-Curry era really, really kind of got us to a point where lines are often two men rather than three. Peterson, Middleton. You get these famous ones that these guys are magical together, Trottier and Bossy. And that third guy can change out. You don't know for sure what it's going to be. You might think you've got the right one for a while. Seems to be the perfect fit, but then it runs its course and now you're looking to do something else. Or circumstance brings it about.
Exactly. I always call them pairs. You get your pairs and you add in your third guy.
Yeah, you guys are a pair.
But here's
I'm the third guy.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. Thoughts on Elias Lindholm, what's going on? I want to give you my thoughts first, Mick.
Let her rip.
And you tell me how far off base I am. So the same can be said about Lindholm as Zadorov. They've been on 3 teams, 3 different systems, and then 3 different coaches, now 4 coaches, and now 4 systems in just over a year. Not to mention moving cross-continent to a new city. And a lot of times it takes a player a year to adjust. Other times they catch on quickly. That's where I'm at.
I think this is the most underrated aspect to the whole Elias Lindholm thing, is what you just said. And I would like to think, as a Bruins lifer, that it's possible. And if I could get, I see Donnie Sweeney every single game. He walks right past where I'm sitting. And there are some nights where I want to just say, Donnie, real quick, is it possible that even though you can't admit this publicly, is it possible that the best thing you could do is leave this thing entirely alone and believe that what you believed last summer when you went out and got these guys based on the season that the group had prior to, and then you did your tweaking of the bottom 6, but your defense was intact, you did your goaltending, and now you got your forward lines and you're saying, okay, we plugged this guy in, 3-zone, 200-foot player. This gives us stability in the middle. We are going to now elevate ourselves from being a good team that was in the President's Trophy discussion most of the season to being a cup contender. That was the theory. I thought it was credible. Now, let's just stay off Zadorov for a second because A, I didn't see that coming. B, I wasn't sure about the player when they did it. And he has supported my skepticism. However, in the Elias Lindholm end of this, is it possible? I know that if anybody moved me 3 times in a year, that I'd feel completely screwed up, and that it'd be a miracle if I felt like I was going to just hit the ground running wherever I was. Wow, they're paying me this money. It's got to happen. Well, then just snap your fingers, click your heels 3 times, and you're going to feel like you're home, and you're going to play like you're making this much money. And frustration, fan frustration, should never be part of the equation. I'm sick of watching blah, 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 blah. What the hell does that have to do with anything? What happened is this happened with this player. And by the way, he was pretty good in the playoffs for Vancouver. Even though the regular season didn't go well, he found himself in the playoffs. And if you look at their stats and postseason stats, he's pretty far up there. And when he does certain things that you see on the ice, that you can begin to realize why the Bruins had this guy pegged. You see him make some elite puck strip moves of players on a back check. You see him, shoot the puck. The guy is a really great shot. He scored yesterday in that awful game on January 2nd at Madison Square Garden that I happened to go to. He scored a beautiful goal. Pasternak found him on the other side of the net, and he just sharp angle, and he roofed the thing. And he wasn't that close to the net when he did it. So he has abilities. And but for some players, they find what they do automatically, and you know what it's going to be, and it just goes in and it plays itself out. It's not automatic for everybody. It's obviously not automatic for him.
Yeah.
If he stood pat, if he left this alone and said, okay, this is our hockey team. Now I know, of course, that, the torch-bearing mob would burn down North Station. We know this.
Yeah.
We know where we are. But this is, I have to believe that this is part of that deep thought that they can't share with anybody, is that I wish we had the luxury of sitting around and letting this play out over again and just do a do-over of this and see what would happen. We don't have the goalie holdout. We don't have Marchand under the knife 3 times in the summer. We don't have this. We don't have that. And for whatever mysterious reason, we're not going to have 7 other key veteran players returning to this team who showed up playing like they have the flu. And maybe this situation is completely different. Maybe it is. I'm not too recommending it. I'm not saying this is what I do, but I have to suspect that deep down in there, in secret, there's part of them that are like, crap, we have to do some things now, but I kind of wish we didn't, because I still believe that this can. You can't be wrong if you go that way. You can't be wrong.
I just want to answer this question real quick, Chara. It's a paper transaction, Michael. Nothing more than that. And Mick was at the game yesterday, and there was no news on Callahan at the time, right after the game. So I hope that answers your question. Mick, I want to talk about Zdeno Chara, Big Z. Have you heard anything official about what his role is going to be? Because I heard he will be advising the coaching staff, and then TSN actually wrote an article yesterday, I believe it was, or maybe it was today, that Big Z is advising the coaching staff.
I don't know, but if this means that he is Nikita Zadorov's personal coach, then that would have to have something to do with this in my mind. Just because the guy is so formidable force in a hockey game, he's really reminds me of Elias Lindholm and Brent Burns and guys who are kind of like wild horses. You plunk them down in the middle of a hockey team that's supposed to be playing a very one size fits all, and yet this guy is just, he's off doing his own thing. He's playing jazz music over there, and when he's on, he's formidable. He's tough, but he can also get completely off the beat. So I don't know. I don't even heard a thing about Z. Big Z, big Z. I'm not in the loop on this one. But I hope that's what it is, because I feel like Zadorov could use some mentorship right now.
That'd
Now,
be interesting.
maybe this is a parallel universe, and this is something that he had been talking with them about since before they went near Zadorov, and maybe this has nothing to do with him, and they just want a sounding board because of Chara was such a strong leader for this team for so many years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he jumps into the fold. Sorry, Dom, go ahead.
Well, the word was, I believe it was Don Sweeney, when asked, said that, or maybe it was Cam Neely. This was something that they had talked about before, and that Chara would return to the team in some capacity when he was ready to, and Chara felt that this was the time that he's ready. I've heard people talk in that he's there in a development role as well. So not only could he work with the coaches in Boston, but with the younger guys in Providence too. Can you imagine him working with a young Jackson Edward?
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
In
Bruin.
Providence?
Yeah. I mean, what an opportunity for young players.
Yeah.
That's a great opportunity for you for young players. I mean, the Bruins have integrated Adam McQuaid, who has become their prospect development coordinator, and so
I also believe McQuaid is doing some scouting too, because he and Don Sweeney, were at a college game Friday night that didn't include a Bruins prospect in it. I happen to know because I was watching the game, and they announced that Don Sweeney and Adam McQuaid were in the arena. So maybe they're looking at a college free agent that could come up at the end of March.
My question to you, Dom, were any of the players they invited to camp in that game?
Or development camp?
Yeah.
You mean the rookie camp?
Either one, yeah.
Well, there's a rookie camp.
The rookie camp was all. Yeah, the rookie camp was all CHL players, and the development camp, no, he wasn't there.
Okay.
So then, could be a pending NCAA free agent that they're
because NCAA players aren't allowed to attend rookie camp because school had already started.
Oh, that's right.
They're not allowed to leave school to attend a pro camp.
All right. Okay. Right.
Yeah,
and that's September. Yeah.
And
development camp teams are now running those like the next day after the draft, it seems.
Yeah, wasn't it late June this year?
Yeah, it was right after the draft.
Yeah, because that was our first look at Dean Letourneau. So
right.
Yeah, I think it was like 4 days later or something, because he had just come over from the draft. It was a couple-day window.
Yeah. The early days of development camps, they were kind of oscillating. Different teams were doing different things, but that seems to be the gravitational force now. Is the NHL wants to get all its business done July 1st. The dust settles on free agency, and summer vacation begins.
Yeah. And somebody asked me the other day, when was the first time you seen Dean Letourneau play live? And I had to go back. You know me, my notes are like this thick. I went back and looked, and it turns out the first time I saw him play live was his first year at St. Andrews College, where he played an exhibition game against a junior B team in the St. Mary's Lincolns, just 7 miles from here.
Oh, boy. How old was he then?
16.
Must have been.
He was 16.
Now, was anyone near his current height then?
Oh, he was big, but he dominated that game. I go back and I check notes on these guys, and like junior B players, they're anywhere from 17 to 20 years of age.
Right.
So he was going against older players.
Yeah. I've watched some of Boston College on TV this year. But I have not been to any of their games yet. And I know the Bean Pot's tomorrow, but I won't be going.
I wish I could go.
It's a fun thing in the years that I've gone to it. It's really great. Yeah. But I watched him on TV, and he moves pretty well for a big guy.
Yeah.
And I got to say, when I met him at the draft, he said that I expect that I'll need to play 1 year at college before joining the Bruins. And yikes, is he in for a rude awakening is what I'm sure others, in addition to myself, were thinking. And now here he is playing on the number 1 ranked team in the country, and offensive results are hard to come by, but they're rolling him out. Greg Brown's rolling him out in crucial situations late in tight games, and he's getting his shifts. And he doesn't look out of place, but you can also tell that he's very raw for that level of game, because keeping up with the tempo that those kids, the top kids there, play at, that's hard. But he's really good with his instincts and using his body and using his reach and finding a way to be part of that. And I'm looking forward to, as he gains in those small increments, there's always a line that you go over. When Glenn Murray came up at the end of the 91-92 season, I don't know how Glenn Murray wound up becoming part of this whole thing for me tonight, but he was a guy who really couldn't skate, in his own words. He wasn't like Brian Curran out there, where his feet are going a million miles an hour, but the body's only, going this fast, point A to point B. He didn't really quite have that strength in his stride yet. But there was a certain point in his career, probably after he left the Bruins and had been to LA and Pittsburgh, where during that time he had matured and become a harder athlete and wound up getting his stride to a point where he could cause anxiety for puck retrievals. He could get to places to shoot the puck, and the raw attributes that made him a prospect for the Boston Bruins, the Bruins wound up tapping into in the post-Jason Allison era, bringing him back in 2001. And the Murray that the Bruins saw the second time around was a hell of a hockey player for them for the whole decade, pretty much.
Yep.
And it really, he loved that CCM tax, the first one they had, the plastic band that started out wide near the heel, and it would thin out a little bit as it got to the side of the skate. It was the first version of that. I had that pair too, and I loved those. Those are also my favorite pair of tacks. But he had that pair, and when they stopped making them, he and Madonna, same thing. They loved that skate, and it bothered them when they stopped making it that way, because when they change it, and it never feels the same. It's kind of like a tennis shoe. There's a certain onesie you say, man, I should have bought like 80 pair of this thing, because they always change the model because they have to keep selling stuff. And sooner or later, you wish you could have that one that you love so much. And so Murray had a stride that, he goes over that edge, that little increment where suddenly his nose is above water and his game has breath, and he can get to the puck and make things happen. And that was a big thing for him. And it didn't happen until after the Bruins had moved on from him, but they got him back and got to enjoy some of those prime years. So I think Letourneau may get there.
I think you're right. I see the same thing, Mick, but a couple of things. At the time when he made his comment after the draft that he would have to do a year of college before seeing time with the Bruins, let's not forget, at that time he was still supposed to go to the USHL this year and then next year was supposed to be his first year in college.
Right.
And so really that's 2 years away. And I'll tell you, there are people in the scouting community that said, even before he laced up the skates for the first time for BC, that said this guy is going to be one and done at Boston College. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Like there are people already ranking him as the Bruins' top prospect. And it's like, no, because he hasn't done anything to show that he is the Bruins' top prospect right now. Based on potential alone, yes. But we haven't seen anything from him yet to suggest he's even going to touch that potential. So let's hold off on saying he's the Bruins' top prospect, and let's hold off on saying he's one and done in college.
Well, now, Dom, everyone's saying that he's the biggest bust since Zach Senyshyn. So,
well, yeah,
6 months.
Way back to Zach Senyshyn.
He's gone from the best prospect in the system to a huge, massive, the biggest bust in Don Sweeney's drafting history in less than 6 months. So, I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle.
We have no idea where that is, although I get a good feeling when I watch Zach. When I watch, what the hell's his name? Dean Letourneau. Poor Dean. I watch him play hockey, and I feel like this kid's a good player if his body fills out and he gets a little more speed. And 3 years at BC, I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out. Because, and the reason I feel somewhat uplifted about it is not like he's a gangly kid who can't seem to get out of his own way, and he's just this awkward body that, boy, what a project this is. The guy's, he's a giraffe out there, and a baby giraffe at that. No, I look at a guy who is functioning. He's finding a way to compete. He's not bad. Mm-hmm. He just can't get over that fine line that Glenn Murray found his way through during his NHL years. But if Letourneau can get over that, and let's give the kid a little time here. When you got a big body like that, especially, I can see the Bruins draft in 24. I got to go and see the Sphere. That was awesome. I felt like all their picks were kind of like a bit of a gamble. Letourneau is a gamble.
Yeah.
He's a high-end, potentially high-end player. But if they're wrong, they're completely wrong.
Yes.
There isn't a B or C level player here. They're either getting a guy who's really going to be impactful or a guy who's not going to be able to play in the league. And then I looked at and it got him. Now his dream was to play major junior, but he realized at 16 is how he explained it in his draft interview that that was not in the cards. In other words, he wasn't going to get drafted. And so he shifted the focus to a college career. And that has panned out in a bigger way than what he originally envisioned. I think he was committed to Northeastern, and when
hold on, when he said he wasn't going to get drafted,
we didn't say that literally. He said it wasn't. I think he said it wasn't in the cards, or realized it wasn't going to happen. Maybe that's how he said it. He didn't say it as literally as I'm interpreting it.
Got it.
Just want to make that clear.
Got it.
But I like watching him play. I'm excited to watch him play because I feel like the next steps for him are going to be pretty intriguing.
Yeah, one of the things that Dom and I talk about on our prospect show, especially when it comes to Dean, is it's his attitude towards the situation. He didn't come in to this first year at BC expecting to put up all the numbers. He knew what his role was going to be. He knew that he had to be open to learning, and he has been. He's taken it, and again, I'm not worried about the production this year. I think a lot of people who are looking at the production and only the production are the ones that are calling him that bust because he's not putting up the numbers that they want him to. But watching him, I'm like you said, I'm more interested to see where he goes from now to year 2 or 3 at BC.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question, Mick. Whether it was Fabian Lysell going to the Vancouver Giants or Loke Johansson to the Moncton Wildcats or whatever, the Bruins work with the players and junior teams and college teams to try and get players into their program. Now with Dean, he was supposed to go to the USHL, and Boston College came calling because they had an opening and wanted him there. Do you know if the Bruins gave their blessing, or did they say, or they could have easily said, no, we want you to spend the year in the USHL?
No, the Bruins are thrilled. They're thrilled that he's at BC, that he's right under their nose.
That's what I thought.
He's right under their nose. They can watch him any day of the week and check in on him. They love it. They're ecstatic with how this thing panned out, and that and Adam McQuaid explained to me that this was Donnie Sweeney talking at the draft, that they were pleased that Boston College had mapped out a plan for him. They actually sat down and drew out a plan and presented it to the Bruins. And the Bruins are like, yeah, baby, we're in. And so everybody was very happy with what the Dean Letourneau plan is. And I would say that they're holding up to it when I watch the games. He's actually getting shifts deep into hockey games that are helping him develop as a player by being in these situations. Now, granted, the number one team in the country playing a big Hockey East game against Boston University on a Friday or Saturday night. These are big situations, and I don't see him disappearing at the end of the bench, which is great.
I like the fact that he's also getting to play with some of these other guys that are going to be NHLers. They've already been drafted, like a guy like Ryan Leonard, even Jacob Fowler and Net. These guys are already drafted. So, it is, Sweet is saying here, he's going to learn sooner by being there sooner. Like, he's already in with guys who are poised to help NHL teams this year or next year. So when he's coming into Boston 3-4 years from now, he's going to be better because of it.
No, I don't. The idea of you'll learn sooner by being there sooner. I almost felt that way about him being at Boston College this year before it happened. But now that he's there and I'm watching it, then I kind of feel like that's the right place for him. And it took me a little bit to get to that point. So I'm pretty happy with what I'm watching. I'm not worried about there not being any numbers. I see hockey instincts. I see intelligence. I see a guy who's finding a way to cope with a wildly up-tempo game compared to what he's been playing against in his career. And I feel like he's adjusting really well to being a player who's no longer has the puck a lot. And I think that's a huge piece of development for any hockey player, to be a smaller fish in a big pond and understand how to play the game when you don't have the puck, when you are playing the game with the puck so much. To me,
and to hear his coaches talking about just his work ethic in practice, his willingness to ask questions, and he absorbs everything that's being said to him.
And it's not bogging him down. It's not bogging him down. I can tell the way he's playing the game, that these are not. There's no paralysis by analysis here. There's not a head game happening here. He's just in the right place, and he's handling it with aplomb in my mind, because to me, this is the best thing for him, to understand what it's like to be in the position he's in, the shifts he's in, the job he's got to do. This is great. This is only going to serve him well. And one other thing I wanted to note was Providence Bruins coach Ryan Mougenel when we were talking about prospects from my little article on the Bruins when the Hockey News comes out with its Future Watch issue, one of the things that Mouginel says he's gotten really good at over the years, meaning himself, is knowing when guys have played their way out of the American Hockey League. They don't belong there anymore. And when it came to Michael Callahan, he kept telling the Bruins, he's ready, he's ready, he's ready. Because he watches him play and he looks at every little thing he's doing out there and how he's playing the game, and he says, what is this guy here for? He's not here. There's nothing more we can do for him. Get him. He's ready for you. And so Callahan was called up, and one of the games, the game against the Senators, Brady Tkachuk, he met Brady Tkachuk near the blue line and stayed between him and the Bruins goaltender all the way to the goal mouth, and made sure he kept his position in front of him to neutralize him without being in an interference posture, and stayed between them. And I just love the composure that this kid plays with. Not everything goes right every shift, but Mouginel nailed it with this kid. When he has the same thing to say about Fabian Lysell, then I'm all ears. But he's not going anywhere near saying that.
Yeah, you've got to give a lot of respect to Ryan Mouginel. It's like fans don't understand that, when the big club comes calling, the first thing they do is they talk to Ryan Mouginel and they say, this is what we need. And Mouginel makes his recommendations based on, Ryan Mouginel is not going to recommend Fabian Lysell being called up to replace Mark Kastelik. No, he's going to recommend, Brown, maybe those types of players. Yeah. But Mouginel deserves a lot of credit for not only his coaching ability, but recognizing a player's ability or what their max ability is.
And where they're at.
Yeah.
How much work is there left to do? He knows when a guy doesn't belong on the ice with them anymore. And Callahan's the only guy I've heard him say that about this season. And maybe when Lysell is able to, on a consistent basis, take care of the puck, compete along the wall, win his share of 50-50s, and be a good, serviceable player apart from his high-end skills and his speed, then maybe Mouginel's going to say he's ready for you. I look forward to the day.
I think we're all do at this point.
We're not there.
Yeah, I mean, it's what he's down there for, to finish and polish off the development. We did have a question from David earlier. We were talking about some of the guys on the roster. I'll get to that in a second. I just wanted you to see Joe's comment that he also loved those texts that you were talking about for skates.
Yeah, baby. So. Nothing like getting that hockey stick that's like an extension of your arms. The late great Guy Lafleur, he during his prime years in the late 70s with the Montreal Canadiens, he had a right-handed shot, Sherwood PMP, pattern made pro. And our sporting goods stores in the Boston area were populated with Lafleur Sherwood PMPs. Why are they there? I figured out because I fell in love with the stick. The versions that we received in the Boston sporting goods stores had an extremely high lie, probably an 8, but they didn't number them because they were pattern made pros. You just got the NHL player's last name on them and their number. That's all you saw. So you could figure it out if you really tried. But any stick you bought that wasn't a pattern made pro would either be a 5 or a 6. And I fell in love with those Lafleur's rejects. And I finally got a chance to ask him about this when he showed up near my press seat for a Bruins game, probably 20 years ago. He was up there grabbing some papers off the table. He was by himself. And I said, Guy, I have to ask you a question. We used to see your sticks in our stores. I fell in love with that stick. Why didn't you like it? I said, I will tell you this. The lie was way up here. So that when the blade was flat on the ice, it was closer to my skates. Or if I was playing road hockey, as you Canadians call it, we call it street hockey, it would be closer. He said, no, he says, I like my hands way down here. I don't know why they did that. So anytime those shipments came in and it's like their golf putter for him, he's like, get them out of here. Get me the right ones. So he wanted his stick more like that. I liked it like this. And without his mobility, it makes sense somewhat. But I just loved it. Had a very subtle curve. It wasn't a plain curve that was like a 70s style where it was just gradual to the end. It was more like a little bit at the end, and then the top of the blade kind of aimed down a little bit rather than up. So rather than the modern curve, which is kind of off the heel with a bit of a scoop, and then you have that way you hit the puck back farther in your stance, like Al McInnes, and he has that tremendous leverage, and that otherwise it's going to fly like a 7-iron if you get it out front. But he had this curve that just, I loved it. I was gold in street hockey with that curve. I could hit the net from 100 yards on a bad angle. I could do it because that Lafleur stick was just, there are certain pieces of hockey equipment, and Joe knows this about that set of tacks. You feel them, they're like pulling on your slippers. Robbie Fedora kept his skates so long. He used that hard toe stuff you would brush onto that black rubbery goo that comes out of that little metal can, and you brush it on the toe. Skate back in the 70s. He kept his skates so long that his toe on one of his 2 skates had like a double hump. It was so beat up. And it's just people have pulled on to stuff they really love. You just go through an NHL dressing room.
I was going to say, we've all seen Morgan Geeky's shirt by now.
Well, that's right. There's a perfect example. Morgan Geeky's lucky T-shirt. And so surprised the players haven't ripped it off his body, which I had that happen to me once with a sweatshirt. You get something you love, you hang on to it forever. And but most of these players, it's their shoulder pads that you never see a new set in somebody's NHL locker. You always see something that looks like they've had it since they were in junior.
Before I pivot the way I wanted to, Michael's question here, asking about Merkulov maybe getting a look before the end of the season, just to round out kind of some of the prospect conversation. Dom, you and I have talked about it towards the end of the year, probably after 4 Nations. Once they get healthy again, we'll probably see some of the younger kids, the Merkulovs and Poitras and Lysell, those guys maybe cycle in. What are your thoughts on the Bruins maybe doing something like that, especially given the way the season has been going?
Is this a question for Dom or me?
For you. What are your thoughts on the Bruins working the kids in like that?
Merck is a much more polished product at this stage of his career. I think the Bruins are starting to solve their power play problems internally. So I don't foresee this scenario. And I think if he was with the Bruins, it would have to be as a power play specialist. He certainly has great ability to understand what's on the ice around him and how to deal with it. The only thing that I have with Merck is I'm skeptical about his point A to point B speed. Joe Pavelski, not a fast skater, had a great NHL career. So I shouldn't write him off. But when I look at a player who's kind of smallish while he's out there, who can't really hold up to the 50-50s at NHL speed with NHL size. And so how does he survive in the league is it going to be as a playing to his skills? He has to be able to have the space and time to do what he wants to do. Does he have the speed to create that for himself? I don't see it. And I'm not sure he's ever going to be a successful NHLer because of that. That's my feeling about Merck. Great competitor, great kid, team player, skills, competitive, all that good stuff. And so I kind of say it with a bit of a broken heart that I can't get away from my gut feeling that I don't think he has the wheels to be what he is in the NHL successfully. He may get looks here and there and opportunities to help out a team, that can fit him in while it's in the process of climbing its identity ladder. But as a solution for a team like the Bruins, I'm not seeing it. I get the feeling that he might be one of those guys who's going to be a really good European pro, but not a great NHLer.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. And his contract is up at the end of this season, so you're probably right.
Yeah, I'm not sure they end up bringing him back if he can't find a way to make himself a mainstay in the organization. If they don't see some of the same things that you're talking about. Let's see. I was going to take the conversation down David's question here about DiPietro or Bussy potentially making the roster next year. Obviously, that was more of a broad question in my mind about the goaltending. We were talking about Swayman earlier, how you've seen the holdout affect his play. We talked about how Korpisalo really kind of took control for a little while in the crease. What do you think the plans are with Korpisalo having contract term? Now Swayman's locked up for this year and 7 more. Dom and I have had the conversation that it's more of an off-season move if you're going to try to offload Jonas Korpisalo. But between DiPietro, the way he's playing in Providence, what are your thoughts on kind of the Bruins goaltending big picture and obviously what you've seen so far this year?
Yeah, Swayman has certainly found himself. I do think the Bruins have some work to do to help him be his best version of himself. Korpisalo's best work and more important work was probably early in the season when Swayman wasn't in form. And this is, I don't think DiPietro is necessarily on the Bruins' radar as an NHL prospect. Bussy has been. He's played better of late. I think he was impacted by how the Bruins handled their goaltending situation. And I think he really had that classic crestfallen AHL start after things didn't go the way he really thought they were going to. And it affected him, affected his season, and he's bounced back from it. He's been pretty good lately, and Providence has pretty good goaltending right now as a result all around. Are either one of those guys solutions for the Bruins? Every time I ever talk to the Bruins about Bussy, they call him a battler. And from a talent standpoint, he's a battler. And so they don't look at him and say, is this guy really got high-end goaltending in him? I'm not sure they look at him that way either, but they love him. They love how he conducts himself, what a team player he is, how he does battle. And that's a great thing to have around your team. So future-wise, hard to say. I think the Bruins would entertain a Korpisalo offer more likely in the summer, like Dom said, because if the Bruins are still meandering, they're going to give the playoffs their best shot, and that means keeping Korpisalo. I can't see the bottom falling out as dramatically as it would need to for them to consider themselves sellers on March 7th. They're probably not big buyers either, but I don't think there's enough runway there for a free fall the way they're playing right now. The only thing about that, though, is the big asterisk, the elephant in the kitchen is they've shown zero resiliency on the road. maybe that one game in St. Louis where they made the comeback in the third period and Andrew Raycroft called on Nesson. When you saw this game's there for the taking, they need to rally and get it. I think they will. And they went and did it. How many times did that happen this year? So
just the once.
Yeah, they have yet to establish a road game identity and sustain any kind of effort through any adversity on the road. They have just not been a good road team. If you're going to do anything in the playoffs, guess where it's starting for the Bruins this year if they make it. So if they get some practice ahead. We're going to need to see some success there. But I'm kind of think that the overwhelming odds are in favor of them still being on the bubble when they get to March 7 and still staying in a competitive mode, but not in a high investment mode. I've lost Chris.
Sorry about that.
He muted himself.
I was saying it's funny that you answered the question that way because Matrix's next question here was about how you think Don Sweeney might navigate the trade deadline given how their position in the playoffs is in one day, out the next. So, Dom, did you have anything to add to that?
I don't know how he'll play it out. I just know that if I was Don Sweeney, I'm not investing in this team. Not without an eye on the future.
Yeah, I guess that for me, the big question around that is Frederick, because that's still the decision right in front of him. Do you really want to? I was not a big DeBrusk guy. I liked DeBrusk when he was playing through the game, and I felt like he really was in the fall of 22. And then he wound up winning the Winter Classic for the Bruins, breaking bones doing it. I don't feel like he was ever the same player again after that. I don't think he sort of became more of a Bobby Ryan for me, a guy who would skirt around the game and then try to impact the game in one fell swoop. And I don't think that I can understand why they didn't want to throw him the core player money to be that guy. And they moved on. Mm-hmm. If you move on from Freddie, I don't want to see him do it that way because I feel like the idea of Frederick is going to be too valuable. Of course, I'd love to know what's on the table, but I got to think that teams have got to be circling the Bruins about Freddie for their playoff run and feeling like he's a guy who could change the game for some teams. And the Bruins are thinking, yeah, well, how do we feel about Freddie? Do we feel about him the way we did about Jake? That he's almost what we need him to be to pay him the money that it would take to keep him? And if that's how they feel about him, and that's why they're this close to his UFA date without a deal, then historically those players don't sign and they go to market and then they're gone. I feel like that'd be a mistake for the Bruins in this case. I hope they don't say, yeah, we're going to call him our own rental. I don't feel like that would be a mistake in this case.
Own rental for what?
Exactly. It's our own run. We're running to the playoffs and you might not even make it. You got to be better than the rest of the teams have to be because they have more games left than you. And you suck on the road.
What about Justin Brazeau, Mick? Well, same situation. What do you do with him?
I feel like that's a much less attractive option for other teams because I don't feel like Brazeau gives off a sense of great value to other teams when those pucks are not going in the net. He does. He fights hard around the net. He's clean and he's big and he did injure the goalie unintentionally. I think he got tripped on the play, hyperextension there, the left knee. Markstrom. Yeah. So he's a big body and he's got some skills and he really fights hard to make it happen. And every time I write him off, he scores a few goals and has a big week. I don't know that there are suitors out there who believe in him the way they believe that Frederick can change their team. And so I don't anticipate it to be as difficult for the Bruins to pony up if they want to keep him. I feel like they could do it at a much more manageable price, similarly to how they signed Marcus Kastelik to an extension. Yeah. That was a better price than I thought would be deserved for his the way he's given up his body for this team this season, he's your 7th player award, Nesson fans.
Right.
And Geeky has made a run here. But really, Kastelik off the hop. And the only reason he's not helping now is because he sacrificed himself to the cause. So he's been a breath of fresh air. And the fact that they signed him and got it done at that price, kudos to the Bruins management. I think they're probably trying to be that successful with Brazeau, and time will tell.
Yeah, and that deal's only going to look better now that we have the projections for the next 3 years for that deal, for what the cap's going to look like.
The cap going up, yeah.
That's only going to look better.
Oof, yeah.
Bet you he's regretting that.
Well, I hope Kastelik doesn't, peel back from it and say, I'm underpaid now, so I'm only going to limit my investment. And then what is he if he's not what he's been? So
I think he'll be fine on that.
So, but he's been one of the few things that's gone really well for the Bruins this year. Him, Hampus till he got injured blocking that shot. Pavel Zacha. I don't know can't name another player on this team that hasn't had a significant chunk of the season where for some reason, legitimate or not, they underperformed. And they may be playing their best hockey now like Pasternak is.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with one off the roster that totally agree with you, Mick.
Yeah, and I'll pull up David's last. Sorry, Dom. Go ahead.
I want to ask Mick the question you asked me last week.
Go ahead.
So, Mick, who are on this roster? You can only pick 5. Okay. Who are your core 5 players for the future?
Ding, 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 ding. My core 5 players going forward with the Bruins. Well, given Marchand's age and the fact that he's without a contract, and if the bottom did fall out, what then? Obviously, Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman, Elias Lindholm, for better or worse. He's your guy. You're going with him. There's no way around that. Your job is to, get him to a good place. So there's, what do we got? Swayman in net, McAvoy on D. When you add Zadorov to this mix in the season Brandon Carlo has had, and now Hampus Lindholm with a cracked kneecap, suddenly all these other core defensemen have an asterisk to them right now. Whereas I would have been more inclined to say the Bruins have gone from a 2 top-line centerman team, a la Crosby, Malkin, Fedorov, Yzerman, Neuendijk, Modano, Sakic, Forsberg, Bergeron, Krejci. Now they're the three team. They're the Niedermeyer, Stevens, Rafalski, Savard, Lapointe, Robinson. This is not what they are. They're McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo. Now you throw Zadorov into this, and Carlo performs the way he has. Lindholm, he has an attractive contract if teams want to make trade offers. But then what does that mean? Is Andrew Peeke kicking up? And is he up to that? There's an awful lot with that defense that suddenly has a lot of question marks for me, that I was so set that this was what their identity was, their goalie and their big 3. And now you have line driver like Pasternak. And so that's their team. So Swayman, McAvoy, Lindholm, Pasta. And because of the newfound asterisks on defense, I'm going to go with Zacha.
Interesting, because mine was Swayman, McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, Mason Lowright, David Pasternak.
I had an interesting conversation with Sean Hutchin, whom I can out now that he has written about this for the fourth period. Sean Hutchin is a highly respected colleague who is a former a coach and mainly helps his son coach, who's a high-level coach, and he's a former referee, and he works as an advisor to families that have hockey prospects for kids. And Sean has an opinion on Lowry that it might be worth the Bruins considering making him a forward again, which was what he was as a kid. And the reason he suggests this is because, and I wanted to flesh this out with him in conversation a couple of weekends ago, because when he says that, I want to get to it. What's the issue here? Because every defenseman is a learning curve. And Lowry is really trying to apply himself. And what we got it down to, what we boiled it down to is Sean observes that Lowry's skate positioning and his defensive posture in general is based on what he's going to do when he gets the puck rather than get the puck or contain the forward, make the defensive play. He's ahead of himself and he's playing with too much brain. It's one thing if your brain is on the next play as an offensive defenseman. It's another issue altogether if your skates have followed you. And he thinks that is happening with Lowry. So maybe Zdeno Chara can help him too. So to me, Lowry's future as a successful NHL defenseman is going to become a core player. If you're talking about his potential as a core player, core member of the team, then if he's going to be a defenseman, then that aspect of his game has to straighten itself out. Otherwise, he's going to be that liability you live with. And that's never been the Bruin style, to live with a liability that is left uncorrected or undeveloped. And if that's how you are in your own end, then that's going to hurt you. I don't know. I haven't given it a long enough look with him to verify my own observation of his, but I'm intrigued by it because I really respect this guy. He's in the weeds of hockey, and that's how he looks at him. And he actually thinks that, man, why don't they just make this guy a forward? They need goals, and he's hurting them defensively. I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's one thing to broad brush somebody and say you don't like players who play the way he plays. You want your defenseman to be Darian Hatcher. Okay, fine. That's one thing.
Yeah.
It's another thing to isolate a situation and say, got nothing against you trying to be Scott Niedermayer, but I need this first. This fundamental needs to be nailed down. I'm looking forward to the rest of the season to watching Lowry so that I can develop my own opinion on this.
But it's an interesting case.
Yes, it is. I find it compelling because of the source.
Yeah, and I find it compelling because of the explanation behind it too. Like, I mean, I've seen fans throw the idea out there, but it just, simply because that's what it used to be. And it's like, well, that's not a good enough reason. But, if you're saying it, if there's a legitimate thing that you can see in his game, now looking forward to, like you said, watching him the rest of the season, kind of seeing how, what are his actions doing before he gets the puck, and that sort of thing. That's where it goes, okay, maybe it can make sense to look at that option. But, we'll have to see what Boston ends up doing about it. I mean, I didn't even realize it was already 8:15.
I did. I kept waiting for, I'm like thinking, ooh, we're over here. I'm wondering when this you're going to pull the curtain on this. But
I mean, Dom and I can go all night, so that's how we are.
Well, no, I can't.
Fair enough. But no, Mick, can't thank you enough for coming on. It's always a blast talking with Dom, but to have you on as well has been awesome. And I can't thank you enough. Dom, do you have any last questions for Mick while we still have him?
I just want to say thanks, Mick. I could listen to you talk hockey all night long, but tell everybody who's watching where they can find you, where they can find your work, and give yourself a little plug here because it's much deserved.
Absolutely.
I live blog Bruins home games at rinkwrapmc.com, which is linked to X and Facebook. And let's see what else. I'm on Pucks with Hags on a weekly basis, it seems, until Hags decides he's got a better gig in mind. And then let's see who else. I go on with Pete, my old pal Pete Shepard from Boston radio days. He has me on. He's Florida based these days, but I go on with him almost weekly in season. And then the Hockey News uses me to write the Bruins article when they do their money power issue, which was recent, the prospects issue, which has been filed. And I don't make the list, by the way. They achieve the list in concert with scouts, and then they feed it to me and say, okay, interview the Bruins and flesh this out for us. And so that's what we do with that. And then there's also the yearbook, which came out sometime late summer. The yearbook Hockey News came out. So I write those issues for the Bruins. And, I used to contribute to Boston Hockey Now, and I'm still friends with them, but that was a last season thing. So,
Awesome.
So that's it for now. And I remain open and interested in, future freelance opportunities. So I'm due to write a Bruins column, but this is great food for thought for me because it really kind of helps me, process the storm of thoughts that are in my head. There's just so much competing thoughts in my head. Sometimes I can't get out of my own way and write something. So I'm overdue. So
Absolutely. Actually, Michael wants to know, I know Dom and I are over on Blue Sky. Mick, have you made your way over there just yet? Or
you know what? I signed up, but I forgot, and I and have not even posted anything or linked anything over there. I need to become more mindful of that as Blue Sky gains steam.
Same for sure. So, but I'm glad Michael brought it up because that is definitely one that not everybody always remembers. So glad to know that you're over there as well. Do you have any final thoughts, Mick, before we say goodnight to the fellas out there who are watching?
Only that my hockey thoughts are never final. I got one final hockey thought. Bobby Orr is the best player I've ever seen play hockey, and I will agree thrilled with that. To say that I put one foot on the last row of the second balcony of Boston Garden before there were luxury suites up there. The other foot on the railing that separated every row, and then you could reach from there and hang on to the I-beam ceiling girder and looked over the front row fans down at the ice 85 feet below and watch Orr. And I never get sick of the next great talent in hockey. I never get sick of, I tell a lot of young people that feel like, they're sick of being lectured to about Gordie Howe this or Bobby Orr that. And I say, did you just see what McDavid did? How he collected the puck at center, weaved around, took one look at where the Rangers were lined up, and then put on this burst of energy out of the turn, bum, 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 and went between the first two, then the second two, and then deked the goalie and scored. And how that all happened so suddenly, said that is Orr stuff. If you got to see that, I tell my pals, I got a childhood pal who was there the day that Bobby Orr flew through the air. He was in the building. He complains to me, how come we don't get players like Cornwall anymore? I said, here's the problem, Pete. It's not that we don't. It's that you don't know them. The leagues are so big now that you can't know. Yeah. You know the NFL. You watch college football. You can't possibly know the NHL. There's too much to know. But please watch number 97 in blue. Don't miss this. They're there. It exists. It's just that those of us who stayed with hockey because it's passionate for us, we don't have to miss out on this. The year there was no NHL, 04-05, my brother was pastoring a church up in Bangor and living across the river in Brewer, Maine. So I decided to take a weekend, go visit the family. Well, guess what? In Lewiston, which is on the way up 95, the Lewiston Maniacs were in the playoffs against Rimouski, and who had a 17-year-old named Sidney Crosby, and I wanted to know what all the fuss was about. So I stopped and went into the arena where Ali stood over Liston in the second fight, and I got to watch Crosby. I saw the fans all gathered down in their Rimouski sweaters, up to the glass on the side glass when the team was about to come out for pregame warmups. So I decided to go join them and just kind of see, okay, what's the big deal here? And Crosby came through that gate, 1 stride, 2 strides, and he's on the other side of the ice. And I'm telling you, I love hockey. I love seeing great players. I got to meet him after the game and talk to him a little bit. I love watching how these big thugs in Rimouski were trying to, on Lewiston, were trying to chase him down. If we could just catch the little runt, we'll kill him. He just threw them off. And he had his own way of doing the power play. He stood about 7 feet along the goal line next to the post. Left-handed shot. So he's wide of the right post, facing with his back to the end boards, facing the action, and he runs the power play from there. So he can either curl around at the net, cross the ice, pass, or to the point, and then tip. He had so many different ways of doing it, and he was so sturdy on the skates. I just loved watching him play. Dave Taylor, LA Kings legend, was sitting behind me at a Manchester Monarchs Providence Bruins game up in Manchester, New Hampshire, not long thereafter, and we're having a great Crosby discussion. And every time there's a player who comes along, you love to watch and see what makes this guy special. Why is he good? And when Pittsburgh had their resurgence in 2016 and came back from the dregs of that season to rally and win the cup, Crosby was playing like the Sidney Crosby of old. He was carrying the puck through the middle of the ice and challenging guys to take it from him. And he was just so strong on his wheels and just so anchored down. When Marchand in his prime skates like this, Ray Bourque in his prime skated like that. It almost looks like the ice is going to break when they push because it changes what area code they're in. There are different styles. McDavid doesn't skate like that. He skates more like a Russian. Bang, 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 bang. Quick feet. And it's just fun watching skilled guys. I love watching hockey. I love watching how people play, learning Bergeron from the age of 18, watching him change himself, change how he plays to help his team to be better, to do the thing. He practiced one-timers when the Bruins had no one-timer guy, not because he wanted to aspire to be a 50-goal scorer, because he thought the Bruin would help the Bruins win. And so before Pasta became their one-time guy in the OV spot, Bergeron was doing it. So it's great watching great players figure out how to be impactful, and I never get sick of hockey.
Yeah, well, Dom and I could sit here and talk it all night, but unfortunately, we all have other things that we have to do. So, Mick, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Definitely, we'll have to have you on again more.
It'd be fun.
Absolutely,
look forward to it.
And all the stories. I mean, I could listen to you keep going. So it's hopefully next time I make it out to one of the dev camps, I see you up there as well. I want to thank our friends over at Ice Shaker for helping us bring the show. Everything from the stainless steel inside to the agitator, all of it's fantastic. Check them out at iceshaker.com. Don't want to bore people with too much of the details. All I got to say is go get yourself one. Go get a Bruins one. I mean, come on, what's wrong with that? My final thought here, as always, go Bees.
My final thought is thank you, Mick.
Yes, thanks for having me on.